Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to the Ultimate Track Guide series. Today, as you can see, we're at Donington Park Circuit. Really fast flowing English track, really lends itself to high downforce, lots of really technical corners as well, some long apexes, some short apexes, some interesting turn-in points, some off-camber hairpins. It's really got quite a mix of challenges to face. If you're not subbed to the channel already, loads of track guides still to come, working through GT3 and GT4, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell icon as well to get a notification each time I post a live stream or another video. Here's Donington Park, let's dive in. So coming out of the last corner, then we're getting a nice straight exit, leaning on that TCS just to get as clean a run as possible down this start finish straight. We're going to immediately flick over to the left hand side of the track in the pit lane. Got a couple of nice braking markers. You've got this sign over on the right hand side, but most of this is sort of feel, you know, roughly that you need to be slowing down and turning in by the end of where the two dotted lines converge in front of us at the end of the pit lane. We know you're braking in a straight line as well, so it's quite a late braking zone. It's actually quite a fierce braking point, which is it's really great. Actually, you can carry a lot of speed into this corner, more than you think, into Redgate. And we're turning in relatively early, but just training that brake slightly just to keep the weight on the nose. And as soon as you're on that apex, you're going to be getting on quite a harsh throttle, okay? Because we need to get a really, really good run all the way through the S's and the curves into what is known as the Old Hairpin. And this is completely flat through here. You need, one big tip I've got for you here is to stay as left as you can on this side of the track, because if you end up going over to the right hand side of the track here, you're going to be braking and turning more into the Old Hairpin, into the right hander. Look how early we come over to the left hand side of the track. If you're braking where that sign is on the right hand side, which is kind of the braking point for this corner, it's a good gauge for where to brake anyway, then you're going to reduce the angle that you're taking, or sharpen the angle, which is going to mean you're going to take less speed, right? So we're trying to open this corner up as much as possible. We're going to be braking and immediately coming back off the brake, so we get that nose turned in. You can take a lot of the curb on the inside, but this is all about speed maintenance through here. We're in the McLaren today and it's exceptionally good, so it's not going to be the same in all cars, but we're almost staying above 100 miles an hour here. You can clobber this curb more than I did. As you can see, we're on full throttle before we even get to the apex. So we've done all of our slowing down, we've turned in, and we're ready to power out using the rotation of the car. You see that little pink blip that came out? You need the right hand tyre to stay on there. Flooring the car, get the rotation around using the diff. You don't want to go much wider than this. The curb, especially in the wet, is very slippery, but if you're wider than this, you're gonna find some difficulties. You can actually, if you find yourself in this position, go straight on and over the grass, and it's actually quite easy to then get back over to the right hand side, or the middle of the track rather, to take this flat sort of Starkey's bridge. It's not really a corner. The next real test is this one. Lovely braking point on the left hand side. We've got this sort of sign and the sort of triangle white ending of the curve, which is a nice little point to start your braking. You see we're still on full power here. We're going to be braking in as straight a line as we can initially on the left hand side of the track, and then we're going to follow the arc of the curve round this corner and aim to apex quite late. As you see, we're back onto almost full power here. We're apexing quite late on in the corner, and that's because we follow the arc of the curve round the curve of the curb. It's quite difficult to say, and we're going to be powering out. Again, this is one that you don't want to go too wide on exit. If I pause here, this on the left hand side here is exceptionally slippery and bumpy, this sort of red zone that I've highlighted here. If you're on full power and turning too much while you're in that zone in the track, you will end up probably somewhere towards that orange bit of the barrier on the right hand side, right? It's I advise to maybe just take slightly less speed through there and concentrate on a cleaner exit. You can use this curbing absolutely fine, and away we are into what is probably one of the trickiest corners on the track. I think it's incredibly difficult to get the power down. You got this brake marker, which is this sort of black marking on the curbing. It's not always there, but you can sort of feel where you are, judging by the crest of the road. It's quite a feel corner as well. You can cut the curb a little bit, not too much, because you will get a bit of a bobble, but you can see we're turning in and using that power. We're braking and using that power again just to stabilize the car a little bit. It's a dab of the brakes and immediately back off them so we can get that turn in. You can cut the corner a little bit. As you see, we're fully off the brake. We're aiming for that right-hand side tyre to be where that purple dot is. As I said, you can cut this a little bit. As soon as you're round on the apex, you're feeding that power on really smoothly so you don't get any big oversteer moments. So a fast and flowing technical first half of the track, or two-thirds of the track really. Let's have another look at it in full time too. All the way over to the left-hand side, over the pit lane, braking probably later than you think into here. Nice and smooth on the power. As soon as you're through the apex, you're full speed. Don't go too wide on the exit. A lot of people take too much speed through there. I can't stress that enough. Over to the left-hand side of the track through here into the old hairpin, making sure you straighten this corner as much as possible on the power before the apex. Really crucial you get that rotation in the car using the diff. Nice and straight on the initial braking, and as you start to turn, you're coming off the brakes to that late apex, following the arc of the corner. Don't go too wide, looking for that braking point, the tyre mark on the left-hand side, taking a bit of curb. As soon as you're through, you're feeding on that power onto Starkey Straight, which is, I think it's actually called Dunlop Straight now, but on a lot of the old much, it's Starkey's Straight. Let's look at it from above then. You can really see how far left we go here. You're virtually in the pit lane, right? And we highlighted that sign on the right hand side as the sort of brake marker to gauge. Basically, if you're past that brake marker, you're pretty much in the danger zone. Anything before that, you can modulate the brake and really get used to the speed that you're taking through there. It's quite an early apex. You're not trying to apex this one too late because there is that curbing on the exit, which is quite useful. I don't advise you use it all the time, but it is there in case. It's a sort of get out of jail free card, really. Flat through the curves then, pretty simple line. Just keep it as straight as you can and then pull over to the left hand side as soon as you can. Again, we're going to pause it at this braking point just by the marker. If you go deeper than this, I've done a sort of skew if line here to see that obviously if you're on the inside, you're going to need to brake a little bit early. If you're maybe fighting with someone, it's going to be really difficult to adjust on the brakes into the right hand, and I think a lot of people take this corner incorrectly because they're too far on the right hand side of the track there. Flat through here, and this next corner is all about coming left and straight as soon as you can, and then following this arc of the curb round. You can see we're just slightly off the curb for the majority of that corner, and then we're apexing late. We're on 3/4 throttle here, and we're trying to avoid the fact that we're going to run wide onto that large green astroturf where the rears are going to light up and we're going to end up on the fence. So keep it quite tight here. You can use it probably a little bit more than this, but you don't want to go too much wider as long as you're back on the curbing at this point where the Astro starts to thin back down. It's almost egging you on to try and go wider there, but you don't gain any time, so there's no point. Looking for the black marker on the curb. Trying to carry some good speed through here because aero does matter, but you're feeding that power on. That's the key thing, is keeping the steering relatively normal, opening up and feeding the power on gently. Straight into the S's, and it's frustrating braking zone this, and you've got this marker in front of us and the one further up, but the braking zone is somewhere on that pink spot. It's just as you go over the crest of the road and you start, that's initial hard braking, and then I can't urge you enough to turn in earlier than you think you need to. This chicane is all about straight lining, okay? We're not trying to drive around the chicane, we're trying to drive over it as quickly as we can in a straight line. So we need to turn in probably earlier than you think you do, especially in the front engine cars. So it's a lot earlier than you think, and you can see how much you can cut this. There's usually a sort of barrel here. Just knock it out of the way. You don't need it, okay? The left tire can basically go through the edge of that barrier, and you can see how flat we're going to be able to take. You can see that as the two sort of Astro curbs line up. You can see how smooth the transition from left to right was through there and how flat that we were able to take that early on the power. Looking for this little black marker on the left-hand side then as the braking point. We're just slightly before it. So if you brake on that marker, you're going to go a little bit wide into this second-to-last hairpin. So we're just before, we're sort of a couple of frames before that black marker, and you're hard on the brakes initially in a straight line. But again, as we start to turn, it's the same story. We're going to feed off the brakes, and we're going to keep this nice and tight into Melbourne Hairpin, okay? You can see we're still on that sort of 50% braking just to keep the weight on the nose, and that's going to decrease steadily. And as soon as we're off the brakes, we're going to stamp on the throttle in this McLaren to get the car rotated. You can see how immediately up I was. A lot of the time you need a relatively stable car for the fast sections, and then around these slower ones you have to compensate for that. So we're immediately on the throttle, get the car rotated, and then straighten that steering as quickly as we can. You're almost aiming for the white hand side of the white area in the curbing. Similar story with this final corner. Then there's actually a little dip in the road, a little where the white line changes to a little bit dark. You can see where people start to stab the brake there. There's the braking point for you. Look out for that. You can feel it in the car as well. You just go over a little bit of a bump, a little bit of a dip, and that's your braking point for this one. Again, we're going to be braking really straight, really hard to start with, and as soon as we start turning, we're going to be coming off that brake because this is off camber. It's a super awkward corner. You can see we're just starting to come off the brake now. We're still slowing down quite a lot because we're still doing over 60 miles an hour, and we're going to try and keep this relatively tight. You can see we're sort of in no man's land here, but that's not a bad thing on this final corner. Down to 41 miles an hour, and again, we kind of stamp, not quite as hard to get the rotation as this is a funny off camber corner, but just enough to make sure that we get that rotation, and again up to 3/4 power, and as soon as you feel you're confident, you're away for another lap of Donington. So let's look at that final section again then in real time. We're braking just over the crest, trying to flatline this chicane as much as we can, turning in earlier than you think, flicking the car to the right. Make sure you go over some of those bumps, so don't take too much on the right hand curbing as it will unsettle the car. Braking in a nice straight line. As soon as you start to turn, you keep it nice and tight. Get on the power to rotate the back end of the car. Make sure you straighten up your steering to compensate for that, otherwise you're just going to keep rotating. And again, braking in a straight line. As soon as we start to turn, we're off that brake, holding the brake quite deep into the corner. Again, the time period between when you're coming off the brakes and onto the power is quite minimal around there because you need that rotation. It's really key. That really interesting point actually is minimizing the time between the two of them. Let's look at this chicane from above then, and I'm going to pause it in the middle here because you can see this is the point where I'm starting to turn right. You can see it's an absolute straight line between the two apexes, basically. Okay, so that's your sort of pure line that you want to try and flatline through there. Obviously, we're taking a little bit of liberty by taking more of the curb, but it's that sort of ethos that you need to get into your brain, that it's as straight as possible through there. You're not driving around it, you're driving through it. Really straight on the brakes end and keeping it nice and tight here. So you can see it's sort of a flat apex almost. There's not a constant arc around this corner. It doesn't quite make sense in the brain. So immediately, it's almost two right angle corners, just really close together. So you've got to stamp on that throttle. Again, in the middle of the track, but sort of try and late apex to slightly getting that straighter exit into the final sort of mini straight onto the start finish straight and away for another lap. Let's look at it in full then, because it comes thick and fast, this track. There's really not much respite. Endurance races are going to become really, it's going to really test your concentration through here, especially into this first corner. It's really difficult to keep hitting that braking point because it's quite a late one and keeps testing you. Through the S's, not too bad. Keep left. Make sure you brake on or roughly on that sign. Open up the corner as much as you can on the power nice and early. Get the back end rotated round. Stay away from the outside curves. Again, similar story. This one, stay left, brake in a straight line. Come off the brakes as you start to turn. Follow the arc of the corner around and nice and early before the apex on the power. Again, looking for the black mark. Carry as much speed as you can through this first half. As long as you get that turn in, you can feel the front end of the car bite. Feed on the power as you're opening up the steering so you don't get those big oversteer snap moments that are great on telly. Try and flatline this chicane, turn in earlier than you think you do. It's a nice smooth motion transitioning from the left to the right hand side. It's not a hack at the wheel, it's a nice and smooth just to keep everything nice and flowing. Braking in a straight line into this one, then stamping on the throttle to get that rotation round, and you're into the final corner. We're looking for that little dip on the right hand side where the line changes colour. Now we hit the brakes in the middle of the track, bleeding off that brake. Again, getting that rotation, but then feeding onto the power from sort of 60 to 100% as you start to open up the steering. It's really key that to get a nice straight and clean exit where you lean on the TCS, but you're not abusing it to the point where it really starts to deteriorate your exit speed. Okay, so relatively early apex. You can go a little bit wider than me here. Don't take too much dirt though, because it's going to compromise your run all the way down into the old hairpin. Okay, so stay left through here, brake on or around the sign. Nice and early turn in. You can clobber the curb on the inside, not a problem, to carry way more speed onto the exit. There's a little bit more room there. You can run wide, but not too much. You can go over the dirt if you really need to. Follow the arc of the corner. Around a little bit of it. You're just trying to think, I need to late apex this, but actually I need to stay within the camber of the road through there. Similar story through this one. The road falls away from you on the left hand side, so if you can keep tight through there, keep tight. Obviously if you're carrying a lot of speed, then just do what you can and hang on for dear life through there. And again, we're trying to brake just after the edge of the over the crest here, trying to straighten up as much as we can. Nice smooth transition from left to right in the middle of that corner. You're not trying to hack the car around to the right hand side. Straight braking, keeping this nice and tight, getting the rotation with the back end of the car, but then compensating by opening the steering up, getting that steering neutral, nice and straight coming out of there. It's really going to maximize your exit speed. And the similar story through the final corner. If you're not subbed to the channel as well, now's the time to do it, because we're going to go into the final sequence, guys. I hope that was really helpful. Apologies, it's taken me a little while to get this Donington track on. I had a mental weekend with various things, but hope you guys appreciated. If you're not subbed already, then do hit that button. The Discord link will be in the description below as well, and I'll see you on the next one. Guys, see you then.